In the latest that's come from the Israel-Hamas war, where death and destruction continue in the ongoing war, and Israel's relentless strikes are hitting hospitals, ambulances, shelters and homes. And while diplomatic efforts continue, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says that there is no possibility of truce at the moment. In the latest, Israel has attacked an ambulance convoy outside Gaza's largest hospital, the Al-Shifa hospital, where at least 15 people have been killed and 60 have been injured as per Hamas-run health ministry. And the visuals from the site show the chaos, where bodies are laying on the ground and bystanders are rushing to help. Now, Israel's military said that it had identified and hit an ambulance being used by a Hamas terrorist cell. It also said that Hamas militants were killed in the strike and accused the group of transferring militants and weapons in ambulances. Hamas officials deny these allegations as baseless. Now, the Palestinian Red Cross condemned Israeli strikes in a statement, while it said that one of its ambulances was struck by Israeli missiles, and reports of more deadly Israeli strikes are coming, where 20 have been killed in shelling of school in northern Gaza. And as per Hamas, the militant group says that the school was being used as makeshift camp for displaced people, and several tank mortar shells fell into the school that was directly targeted. As Israeli strikes continue to indiscriminately hit camps, schools, residential buildings, Israel also struck a French cultural institute in Gaza. And France has reacted to these Israeli strikes with astonishment and incomprehension. France's foreign minister has demanded a full investigation into why the building was hit. Now, France will meanwhile host an international humanitarian conference for the civilian population in Gaza on November 9th, and this as it looks to coordinate aid for the besieged Palestinian enclave. Indonesia has released the first batch of humanitarian aid to Gaza that includes food and medical supplies. The 51.5 tons of supplies is provided by the government and several humanitarian organizations in Indonesia. Now, Israel says that it has eliminated many militants in the last 24 hours, and Israeli army continues to release videos of their troops and tanks operating in Gaza, as well as monochrome footage of what it said were Israeli Air Force strikes on Gaza Strip. Now, in the meantime, continuing his diplomatic efforts, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has arrived in Jordan after Israel's visit as part of his fresh West Asia tour amid the war. And Blinken in Israel urged for a temporary stop or a pause to the military offensive to allow aid to enter Gaza. However, he faced pushback from Netanyahu, who rejected any such halt unless hostages held by Hamas are freed. Now, in Jordan, Blinken will be meeting 5 Arab foreign members. The foreign ministers of Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the UAE and Qatar will meet Blinken in Amman later today. And while Blinken was speaking in Israel, Hezbollah chief also broke his silence and spoke on the war for the first time since the war broke out. He outrightly called the October 7th Hamas attack, quote-unquote, exclusive Palestinian effort, and denied any Iran or Hezbollah involvement. He warned that a wider conflict in West Asia is a realistic possibility if attacks on Gaza continue, while he placed the responsibility of the ongoing war firmly on the United States. Joining me live is Dr. Malcolm Davis. He's Senior Analyst in Defence Strategy and Capability at Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Welcome to the show and broadcast. I will begin my first question, Dr. Malcolm.
Well, it's great to have me on.
All right. So Israel rebuffs U.S. push for humanitarian, and this as the latest development. Israel rebuffs U.S. Push for humanitarian pause on the latest visit of Secretary of State Antony Blinken, where Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected U.S. calls for a humanitarian pause, and he says that hostages must be freed first. Now, at this juncture, what course will the negotiations take between Israel and Hamas after this statement by Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu?
Look, there will be no negotiations, I think is the simplest answer. Israel has made it clear that there will be no pause whilst Hamas holds over 200 hostages that they took on October the 7th. And I think that it's unrealistic to actually expect some sort of humanitarian pause or ceasefire, particularly given that Hamas has indicated it has no intention whatsoever of engaging in a ceasefire. So Israel is not going to cease its operations and allow Hamas to attack mercilessly. I don't see a pause happening. There may be increasing international pressure for a humanitarian pause to allow humanitarian assistance to get in and to increase the potential opportunity for some sort of negotiation on the hostages. But I'm not seeing any prospect of Israel and Hamas sitting down at the negotiation table.
Sure. And Dr. Malcolm Davis, Paris has announced that it will host an international humanitarian conference for Gaza's civilian population. Now, this is interesting, the time that this is going to be held at, because invitees to France's International Humanitarian Conference will include Egypt, Jordan and the Gulf countries, along with European nations and members of G20. Now, what do you make of this move in the landscape of diplomacy?
Look, I think having a conference on providing humanitarian assistance to the Palestinian people in Gaza is entirely appropriate. Whether it actually leads to practical outcomes in terms of getting aid to the Palestinian people is another question. Two key factors, of course, is whether Hamas will permit any aid to get into Gaza, and secondly, whether Israel will circumscribe its military operations to allow aid convoys to go in, probably from the south. So I think that having a discussion, a diplomatic discussion between regional actors, between the United States, maybe Israel will be involved, is entirely appropriate. But I wouldn't necessarily go so far as to say that it will immediately open up a solution to provide that aid to the Palestinian people.